What's going on, sports card hobby family? It is another day. It is another sports card video. Today, a semi-controversial video because I'm going to talk about a baseball player where I'm really going to focus heavily moving forward. And I'm really talking about long-term buys and holds. But Dustin, you don't know anything about baseball. Well, I will explain exactly where I'm coming from here. Before I get started, huge thanks to today's video sponsor, Veraswap. Maybe you've got some cards, maybe some cash that you'd like to piece together and look at getting into other things. Trade nights have become all the rage across the country. Well, now you can do the trade night from the comfort of your own home on the Veraswap app. Definitely check them out. They have lowered their fees and they are verifying these transactions for you so that we don't have to do these back alley deals like usual. Check out Veraswap today. I'll put a link in the video description as well as in the pinned comments below. All right, friends, if you watch my channel, you know that I'm more heavily football cards. I do like my Stranger Things, kind of that non-sports stuff, and some basketball cards as well. Baseball cards, I do have some of the type of stuff. I've got some Hall of Fame autograph style things, but I don't focus as much on it. But I think I might change my tune a little bit here. I've been doing some research on a particular player, and I do have a couple cards for him, but I think I'm really going to ramp it up over the next few years, especially if we continue to have a slump in prices or this person just never really kind of gets any sort of a bump. And the person I am talking about, I do have a couple of cards for him so far, is Barry Bonds. Barry Bonds, I've shown these previously. And the one thing that I did notice, especially if you're looking at kind of, late 90s, early 2000s, and this is really when he was having a lot of his success, is there are a lot of game used type cards and autograph on-card auto stuff, and it doesn't really break the bank. It's not crazy expensive like what you would see in some of the other players, even modern players that are not proven at all whatsoever. And I've been paying attention, especially when we look at vintage cards. There's such a huge emphasis on the Mickey Mantles and the Babe Ruths and the Stan Musials and the Roberto Clementes and kind of the legends of the game. And there's so much money put into these players and they're iconic players. It's not taking anything away from vintage cards or those players, but it just feels like there's been such a heavy movement, especially over the last 5 years into these cards. I just don't feel like I'm really getting any sort of a deal on these. I almost need to see some sort of a slump in vintage baseball if it ever does happen. And I just don't know. But the one thing that I've been thinking about, and you've seen kind of a movement into Ken Griffey Jr. There's a big Ken Griffey Jr. collector base now that's really expanded again over the last 3, 4, 5 years as people are getting back into the hobby, remembering the greats from their day. And I think that's kind of the key here with Barry Bonds. He is one of the greats from my day. Looking back, he was such a dominant player, and he was an excellent player before all the PED stuff came about. I mean, let's look at some of his career stats. So we've got a career batting average of 298, 762 home runs. Of course, he is the home run leader. He holds the record there. There's only 3 other guys that have 700 plus home runs. It's Hank Aaron, it's Babe Ruth, it's Albert Pujols. WAR, wins above replacement. WAR is a big baseball term that the baseball folks pay very close attention to. What's the WAR for this player? Can it improve this, that, or whatever? He is 4th. Barry Bonds is 4th all-time behind Babe Ruth, number 1, 2, Walter Johnson, 3, Cy Young, and then, of course, it's Barry Bonds, 5, Willie Mays, 6, Ty Cobb. So for career WAR, and that's something that the baseball fans and the baseball card collectors pay very close attention to, he's way up there. He's top 5. He is number 4. Only 65 hits away from 3,000 hits. His intentional walks, this will absolutely astound you. And I remember going back to his massive home run days where he was just cranking them out of the park. His career intentional walks. So we're not talking about where he actually had an opportunity to hit. Intentional walks, 688. He by far, way above second place. 688, the beloved Mickey Mantle that everybody loves to talk about and goo goo gaga over, 151 intentional walks. And then with Babe Ruth, they have him down for 80 intentional walks. So these guys got up to bat. They had many more opportunities to get up to bat. Now I understand maybe, careers weren't as long and this, that, the other thing. I get it. I mean, Barry Bonds was in the league for 22 years. He had a very long career. 7 NL MVPs, 14 All-Star selections. He did not win a World Series, but in 2002 with the Giants, they did end up losing to the Angels in 7 games. He batted .471 with 8 hits, 4 homers, 6 RBIs, and 8 runs scored in 7 games. The guy was an absolute machine. And I know, you can look at kind of, the team wins and everything. I know when you look at these kind of legendary Yankees, you've got a lot of team wins, you've got a lot of championships. But that's because these were just dominant rosters. These guys were on absolutely insane teams. Derek Jeter's got, 5 titles? Look at the players that were on the teams around him. These are some of the best teams of all time. And so with Barry Bonds, that was never really the case. I can't think back at a team that Barry Bonds was on where it was just a stacked roster top to bottom. But he, as far as individual player statistics, he just stands out there. And of course, he's not in the Hall of Fame as of yet because he's tied to PEDs going back to the 90s, 2000s. And frankly, hundreds of guys were going back to the 90s and 2000s. And I personally believe, when we look back, sports betting is something, if we go back 20, 30 years, this is absolute taboo. Nobody did this, or it was kind of this underhanded thing, like under the table, like we're betting on games and this sort of thing. It wasn't legal, sports betting. Now the major leagues are all back in this. Like the NFL's got a whole deal with sports betting going on. It's all the rage. Like sports betting is not taboo anymore. And I personally think that the PEDs, testosterone, and this sort of stuff, I think it's going to be less taboo in 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And I do think eventually Barry Bonds gets inducted into the Hall of Fame. I believe if I have this right, baseball fans can correct me, is that he can't get in based on the normal vote. I think he missed the deadline or whatever, but he can still kind of get put in on special circumstance. They can put him in. The other committee or, out of cycle committee or whatever can do this. The Baseball Hall of Fame, that's a whole other topic of discussion where it's like, I don't know anything about do these guys know what they're doing at this point? But anyway, when I look at the greats and I collect, Tom Brady, Drew Brees is a Saints fan. He's my guy, so he's my PC guy. But Drew Brees, a fraction of the price of Tom Brady's stuff, so I like to collect his stuff. But Drew Brees, Tom Brady kind of being that football goat. But Barry Bonds is one of those guys, especially with baseball cards just kind of being that mainstay, just popular. Baseball card collectors were the start of the whole collecting hobby in the first place. And I want to kind of pick my spots there in baseball. And with vintage baseball, I'm just not seeing a ton of upside. Now, again, this could be something where it just continues to go up over time, but just the massive boom that we've seen over the last 5 years and people moving into safety in vintage baseball, I just don't know. I would rather pick a guy like this where he is clearly dominant. And for one reason or another, he doesn't have the same sort of values or hobby love because of the whole PED era, which frankly, again, a lot of guys fall into this bucket, this PED era. And even today, we've got it as well. And so I think there's guys too that just sneak beneath the radar that don't necessarily get caught, that maybe would shock people, who knows. So I'm adding Barry Bonds to my roster. I'm going to continue to add on. I do, and like I showed you, I've got a couple cards there. And as I see kind of auctions to where, and I've done this with Tom Brady too, if there's something I feel like is undervalued that's coming through, I want to stack some Barry Bonds stuff for the future. Because I feel like really it's the PED thing is the only thing that really holds back this guy from really getting a boost in values. A lot of the money being spent on these new age prospect guys will not even get into the same stratosphere of a career as a guy like Barry Bonds. So if I'm touching baseball cards, vintage baseball, I missed the boat. New players, forget about it. It's like buying quarterbacks or whatever, I'm not going to mess with it. So that's where I'm at, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.